The Amazing Digital Circus, Helluva Boss, Monkey Wrench, Murder Drones. What do these shows all have in common with each other? Well, they all fall under indie animation. But what is indie animation? Well, if you're watching this video, then you probably haven't been living under a rock, but for those of you who aren't quite caught up, indie animation is exactly as it sounds. Animation that is independently funded by creators outside of the mainstream animation industry. Most of the time, their projects are dependent on Kickstarters or Patreon. Companies like Disney, Warner Brothers, and DreamWorks all have countless employees and almost limitless amounts of resources and cash, while most indie creators are struggling to even get their shows picked up in the first place. However, over time, this has slowly started to change. Although indie animation has been around for decades, since practically the dawn of animation, over the last 5 years, we've seen so many creators jump into the ring with varying degrees of success. We went from small flash animations on Newgrounds to big budget shows using Unreal Engine, stuff that could literally be on streaming services.
In fact, some indie animated shows have already started making their way to streaming services in the form of Digital Circus and more recently, Helluva Boss. Now one day, indie animation changed forever
when a little-known pilot appeared on YouTube. I'm of course talking about Hazbin Hotel. Released on October 28th, 2019, Hazbin Hotel absolutely took over the internet. The pilot currently sits at over 100 million views and was a huge inspiration for many other artists who tried following in Hazbin's footsteps. And just a month after Hazbin released, VivziePop released the pilot to another show we're all too familiar with, Helluva Boss. With 2 seasons and millions of views, Helluva Boss would quickly become one of the biggest indie shows on the internet. Hazbin would also continue to thrive as it was picked up by Amazon and released
in January of last year on Prime Video.
Now, while Hazbin is technically not indie as it was picked up by a much larger studio, Helluva Boss is still completely indie
despite the deal with Amazon.
But when it comes to stuff like Hazbin, it just goes to show that big companies like Amazon are finally starting to see interest in this sort of thing. And, you know, say what you will about VivziePop. I'm not here to discuss or say you're right or wrong, but, you know, I'm just speaking facts. VivziePop was really a pioneer when it came to getting their story told. And although it took, you know, quite a long time for Hazbin to finally see the light of day as a full series, I gotta admire the motivation. Seeing these small internet cartoons getting put on these platforms gives them a lot more validation. People will look at something like The Amazing Digital Circus on Netflix and take it much more seriously since it's on a more mainstream platform viewed by hundreds of millions of people. It's honestly really sad and unfortunate that a lot of people think if it's a show on YouTube or not made by a multi-billion-dollar company with an absurdly huge following, it's of lesser quality than something on Netflix. But as I just said, this is thankfully starting to change. Speaking of The Amazing Digital Circus, the company behind the show, Glitch Productions, has consistently had one mission: to make indie animation viable for the entire industry. The company was founded in 2017 by Luke and Kevin Lerdwichical. Yes, I actually pronounced their name right. The brothers originally started working on another series, SMG4, before moving on to larger scale projects with higher budgets. The first of these projects would be released in 2019, Meta Runner. The series takes place in the distant future and follows a girl named Tari as she discovers that she has the uncanny ability to warp into video games. While Meta Runner did see a fair amount of success, in reality it was nothing compared to the 2 shows that followed, Murder Drones and of course, The Amazing Digital Circus. These 2 shows really helped put them on the map. They really went from being one of the most overlooked and underappreciated animation channels on YouTube to now being the king of indie animation, with the latter I mentioned becoming a worldwide phenomenon. Digital Circus really helped open the eyes of these Hollywood executives who would rather pump out pointless sequels and quick cash grabs than tell creative and unique stories with heart and soul behind them. Now, this video isn't just me trying to glaze Digital Circus, but it's to demonstrate just how much of an impact the show has had and is helping to motivate hundreds, if not thousands of creators to get their stories told. There hasn't been a single indie project to reach this amount of success since Hazbin. Obviously, it's not a competition and should never be one. I don't even know why I have to say this. Over time, I think we'll start to see more Hollywood executives noticing, and hopefully it has some sort of impact on the bigger industry as a whole. There are so many shows and pilots out there that I'd love to see get some of the spotlight. Shows like Lackadaisy, Spooky Month, Ramshackle, Punch Punch Forever, Godspeed, Monkey Wrench, the list goes on and on. Shows like these deserve all the recognition in the world, and now that indie animation is pretty much the talk of the town across the entire internet, these creators are slowly starting to get that recognition. By the way, I'm begging you, please go check out Monkey Wrench. It's criminally underrated and deserves way more views than it gets. I'll actually be releasing a video talking solely about Monkey Wrench fairly soon, so I'll keep my glazing to a bare minimum, but man, it just makes me so happy to live in an era where small teams and internet creators are starting to rival Hollywood. Obviously, there are a multitude of factors preventing indie animation from getting the same kind of treatment as Hollywood. Lack of funds and resources is a big one. So I won't sit here and say that indie animation is destroying Hollywood and will reign supreme over all things animation like those clickbait YouTubers like to put in their titles. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But I think at the very least, it'll open the eyes of the industry to help improve it. In turn, I hope we see another renaissance within Hollywood. I would love to see Disney not release all these sequels and pointless live-action remakes in favor of truly original and inspiring films. But until that day comes, at least we have the indie animation renaissance. I also want to quickly add that I don't think that there's no original films being put out of Hollywood. I have to point that out there. Obviously, there are tons of original movies and shows out there. So, I just want to make that very clear. I don't think that everything coming out of the bigger industry is bad or should be looked down upon. I'm just saying that, it's a really bittersweet pill to swallow to see, a company like Disney going from literally the king of animation, like just in general, to now fumbling their 100-year anniversary and releasing tons of mediocrity. And again, I'm not saying everything Disney's putting out is bad now, but, compared to even just 10, 15 years ago, things are vastly different. And I think now that the internet and social media is way more mainstream and in the public eye, it's so much easier for people to make content. Like you watching this video, if you have any sort of artistic ability or want to put some effort into making a story of your own, what's stopping you? Go do it. Literally, just go do it. Don't think about it, just do it. And I know that's easier said than done. There are a lot of things, and it's a long process to try and make it big in the industry. And I'm not saying you have to make it big. There are still tons of inspiring creators that don't get very many views, but go do it. Because if you have a story that you think needs to be told, go tell it at all costs. You don't need a crazy budget to come up with a story. You just need a pen and paper. And as the months go by, we are seeing so many people run with that philosophy and are creating shows of their own. I've seen people who have no background in animation jumping into the animation industry. Hell, Luke, as I mentioned earlier, one of the founders of Glitch, had very little animation experience when the company was founded, and look at them now. So yeah, I just wanted to make this video to kind of, rant about the current state of animation and why I think indie animation has started blowing up at the perfect time. And I am extremely excited to see where it heads in the future. But that's going to be it for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you enjoyed this video. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, guys, this is Inferno signing off.